Good evening. As always, we want to start by letting our Spanish-speaking viewers know that a translated version of this news briefing is available for them. Jose?
Agradecemos a la comunidad latina por acompañarnos hoy. Esta actualización se está transmitiendo en vivo por nuestro canal de YouTube con interpretación al español. Para escuchar la versión en español, puede usar el enlace de YouTube que se le incluyó en la descripción de esta publicación en Facebook. Gracias. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Jose. And thank you all for joining us for another joint news briefing by the County of Sonoma, the City of Santa Rosa, and CAL FIRE. My name is Paul Gullickson, Communications Manager for the County of Sonoma, and this is our update on the glass fire in Sonoma and Napa counties for Wednesday, September 30th at 5 p.m. We also have with us today Dr. Sundari Mace, Sonoma County's Health Officer, who will be giving us an update on our other ongoing battle, the one against the coronavirus, and how we are managing both of these fronts. But first, we begin with the glass fire. As we entered this third day of this firefight, crews were hopeful that once again, weather conditions would be favorable enough to allow them to dig more fire lines, put out hot spots, and gain some ground in controlling this fire, which as of this morning was just 2% contained. But we also were alerted that winds were expected to pick up later this week, as well as some high temperatures and the possibility of another red flag warning. For an update of how the day has gone and where we stand, we'll begin with CAL FIRE Division Chief Ben Nichols. Ben?
Thank you, Paul. So this afternoon, the fire is looking much the same that it was yesterday, a little less smoke in the air, which is a good thing for us. And as you noted before we started the call, that we finally have that clean air that we've been waiting for all day long to sortie those helicopters to start helping the ground troops with that long process of getting in there and mopping up those hot spots. So as we stand coming into the evening tonight, 48,440 acres at 2% contained. Today we have 2,099 firefighters on the line, and we're working to strengthen the lines that we got put in yesterday. So there was successful firing operations completed in Annadell Park yesterday, and from Bald Mountain on the county line in the Sugarloaf State Park down to Highway 12 along Adobe Canyon Road, as well as on the northern portion of the Sonoma County side of the line from Gates Road, the end of Gates Road, out to the end of Sharp Road to secure those two flanks of the fire here in the county. That mop-up is continuing. I was out on the fire line today. There are a lot of pockets of heavier fuels like we saw on the Wall Bridge, especially in the St. Helena Road area. So those crews are diligently working out there to mop up that line. With that, I'll call it end of report.
Thank you, Chief. For a further update on the fire, let's go to Santa Rosa Fire Chief Tony Gosner. Chief?
Yep, good evening, Paul. Thank you. Yeah, so in Santa Rosa, just to tag along on what Ben said, it does look really good around Santa Rosa. We've got a couple of structure groups in and out of Oakmont all day, picking up hot spots. They're doing tactical patrol all along Oakmont, the Highway 12 corridor. As I was out there today, we saw utilities teams from Comcast, AT&T, and PG&E working on their infrastructure as well. But there is a lot of hot stuff still out there. When I drove out there last night, I'll tell you it was much darker, right? Not a lot of stuff glowing at night. Which was good, but there, when the sun comes out, it starts heating up. So there's a lot of tactical patrol going along the all of Highway 12 and Calistoga Road, and there's still activity in Annadell State Park. I am told that they have the majority of that work done in terms of any new firing operations. Most of it's all plumbed with hose, and they're doing mop up in there as we speak to get prepared for this wind event. And I just want to remind everyone, we do have a wind event that's supposed to take place tomorrow at 1 o'clock. It is a red flag warning. So it goes from Thursday at 1 till Friday at 6 p.m. Along with that, we are trying to upstaff additional engines in Sonoma County. So we're pulling crews right now to see who's available. Those crews will be for initial attack on any new fires within the county. And again, the goal is to make sure no new fires get started, or at least they're held to a very small acreage so we can concentrate on this fire. We got 2 days that we have to get through with weather. And then once we get through that, then we'll be able to really assess where we stand. For the latest information about the glass fire and updates within the Santa Rosa limits, please go to srcity.org/glassfire. And additional updates and fire-related information is available on Facebook at Santa Rosa FD and on Instagram and Twitter at Santa Rosa Fire. And I'll close it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And for updates on our evacuation zones and what's happening there, let's start with Sergeant Juan Valencia of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. Thank you, Sergeant, for being here.
Thank you for having me again. So as of last night or this morning, we have no new evacuation orders that are going out, or at this time, we are not lifting any orders or warnings. The weather is a big factor, and we're working closely with CAL FIRE and our fire partners. Basically, we want to keep everybody safe. We continue to have 50 additional deputies out there patrolling the area that's under an order, basically trying to keep people from going in and looting. We have 36 deputies assigned to patrol. So they're handling all the calls for service. So that way the 50 deputies that are out there are doing proactive patrol enforcement in those areas, keeping your stuff safe. We did make 5 arrests within the last couple days. And I think they made 2 more today for people entering an evacuation area. These people have no business being there. They're interviewed by deputies, and during that interview, it's determined that they're there to commit some sort of crime. So therefore, they're arrested, and it's 0 tolerance. They get booked into county jail. No missing people at this time. No fatalities reported to us. I do want to address that some of our numbers were incorrect on our population. The new number for people that fall under an evacuation order or 6,098. And that's an unincorporated area. That means it's out in the county, and 173 people that fall under a warning. We asked for continued patience during this evacuation, during this process. Like it's been stated earlier, little containment. They're out there fighting this fight to get everybody back home. We just want to remind people to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates, and just remind people to take care of themselves and take care of their family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant. And for the city perspective on law enforcement front, we have Chief Ray Navarro of the Santa Rosa Police Department. Thank you for being here, Chief.
Thank you, Paul. So first of all, I want to thank the community for their cooperation and support during this difficult time. I know it's very difficult for everybody within Sonoma County right now. For Santa Rosa, we have no changes to our evacuation orders or warnings today. The latest evacuation information can be found at srcity.org/evac updates. For the incorporated Santa Rosa area, we continue to have approximately 12,900 residents under evacuation order and another 22,600 residents within the evacuation warning areas. We ask that the community please remember that the evacuation order means that it is unlawful to be in these areas. More importantly, it's also unsafe. We have burnt power poles, debris, and continued risk of fire danger in these particular areas. So we ask that you continue to obey the evacuation orders and the road closures. Fortunately, we have had no reports of looting or burglaries in the evacuated areas. and all of our missing persons have been located. We will continue to watch over and maintain safety in the evacuation zones with the assistance of mutual aid agencies. And the city of Santa Rosa is not issuing reentry passes. So unauthorized persons are not allowed to be in or enter into the evacuation order areas. And we also ask that the community do not come to the police department to request reentry because we are not authorizing any passes. It's also important to note that we will absolutely not tolerate any crimes, including looting or the intent to loot. And so anyone inside these mandatory evacuation zones are subject to arrest. Three big things. We ask that you stay out of the evacuated areas. We will respond to calls for service there regarding suspicious people. And it does take away our resources from other priorities. Be mindful of traffic. There is still power out in certain areas. And we also have a lot of heavy equipment that are being moved. And some of these large emergency vehicles are from out of the area. So we want you to be very careful. And then also follow us on Facebook, Nichols, Twitter, and Instagram to keep updated on the most recent events and updates as we go through this emergency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you for the reminders about not going into these areas that are evacuated. Those are important reminders for all of us. We just need to be patient. We're pleased to have with us again, Congressman Mike Thompson. Congressman?
Thank you, Paul. And again, thank you to everyone who's on the call. As I've said before, I want to make sure all of your viewers know this. This is an incredible team with too much experience in these types of disasters, and they're working 24/7 to make sure that you're safe. And behind them is a huge cadre of individuals that are also part of that team who are doing just the same. I went out today and looked at a lot of the damage in Sonoma County with Chief Nichols, and saw a lot of people doing great work. County employees, first responders, everybody was doing a fantastic job. I've said this on the call before, but this week we were authorized for the Fire Management Assistant Grant Fund from FEMA that provides for 75% of the cost. The federal government provides that 25% matching cost. Again, I don't think that's enough. I think it needs to be 90%. I've introduced legislation to make it 90%. And that bill is included in the new coronavirus relief bill that you're hearing about on the news. I suspect that bill will pass this week. I've also introduced tax legislation to help folks through the tax code. And I'll do everything I can to make sure you have access to all the federal resources possible. In the meantime, I'll just second what the other folks have said. Be careful, be safe. If you're told to evacuate, do it. Get your go bag ready and be ready to go. It's for your safety, your family's safety, your neighbors' safety, and for the safety of the community. Thank you all so much. And that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you. And we're very pleased to have both our congressional representatives with us today. Let's go to Congressman Jared Huffman. Can we see here? Okay, well, we lost him, but we'll have him back on hopefully in just a second. But we do have our state senator, Bill Dodd, is with us as well. We appreciate that. Senator Dodd?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I'll be very brief here. Last night I talked, about one team, one fight, quote from OES Director Mark Ghilarducci. I was there at the fairgrounds today and saw a very tight, incredibly well done briefing. Continue to be impressed Also to thank the not only all the CAL FIRE men and women as well, but the CHP who's out there on the line working very, very hard. Appreciate everybody's support and hard work.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator. We appreciate your efforts to help us in many ways. We'll come back to the local front. Let's go to get an update on what's happening at our Emergency Operations Center. Let's go to Chris Godley, the Director of our Emergency Manager for Sonoma County. Chris?
Good evening, everyone. Very briefly, in support of the community that being impacted by the event, notably the county and partners are established and running shelters. At this point, due to a reduction in the need for shelters, we've been able to consolidate a few of those. We're now down to 4 shelters. Our census or our count of individuals in the shelters this afternoon shows that about 140 individuals off of the high of 350. At this point, it's important to note that these shelters are really run and being directly supported by a whole host of allied community-based organizations and nonprofits. It's very important to recognize that a number of individuals and organizations are stepping up, not including just the American Red Cross at Sonoma State University, but also the Salvation Army, which is helping to feed a number of folks, as well as the organization that we refer to pretty commonly as Sonoma Family Meals. They've been supporting a number of folks throughout the COVID event and have stepped up to help us at a couple of shelters as well. We're also looking at the city of Santa Rosa. They were been able to identify and assist in moving their residents from the Finley Community Center into the Sonoma State University non-congregate setting, which is a bit more supportive of individuals that may be at risk for especially COVID. At this point, we're also looking at continuing to address the transition, if you would, already planning for a recovery and supporting reentry once conditions permit. This is going to include potentially opening reentry stations where residents can go to get information on how to reenter areas safely, environmental support, as well as potentially equipment that may allow them to go into burned areas safely. We're also looking at partnering with the city of Santa Rosa for a local assistance center. And certainly as more details become available, we'll get that right out there to the community in terms of timing especially. And we're looking forward to the weather over the next couple of days with that increased heat. That should be a significant concern, as well as, of course, the winds that may be coming in associated with that weather event. And of course, that means we really want to be able to prepare to resurge our capacities to respond to demands that may be facing the community, whether it's heat or increased fire activity or a whole host of other things. We're actually also tracking the California Independent System Operator, or Cal ISO, as they're looking at a significant demand on the electrical system. And having learned our lessons a month ago, we don't take anything for granted there. So that completes our contribution to this media briefing.
Thank you, Chris. And I think Dr. Mace is going to provide a little more detailed information about some of the status of those evacuation shelters in a little bit. But now let's go to Supervisor Susan Gorin, the chair of the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors. Susan.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you to our state and federal officials for standing by our sides once again and providing great service. And to all of our first responders with the good information that you provided this afternoon, helping my constituents understand why it is imperative to really be patient. We want to get you back into your homes. I want to get back into my home as well. But the reasons why it's so important to be patient. We know that you're anxious to get back home and reestablish yourselves. But as folks have said, infrastructure is still being repaired along Highway 12 and along some of the major entry points into Sonoma Valley and the eastern Santa Rosa. So, but as our fire chiefs have said, this is still an active fire they're pouring all resources into tamping out the fires, containing the fires, especially in Annadell, Sugarloaf, Hood Mountain for sure, so that you are safe coming back into the areas of which you live. This is not a time for sightseeing. The public must remain out of the evacuation order zones. When residents do return to the burn areas, it will be important to follow protocols for re-entry provided by the city and the county. And that process includes information contained in a health order that Sonoma County Health Officer Dr. Sundari Mace signed yesterday on September 29th. The health order requires residents to use personal protective equipment in the burn areas and prohibits residents from starting cleanup before receiving permission from the County of Sonoma's Department of Health Services. The health order is available on socoemergency.org website. I know from personal experience how absolutely is important the PPE is while you start digging through the ashes. Sadly, there are a lot of toxics still in the ashes that have to be cleaned up before it is safe for you to work on your devastated properties. Please do not attempt to enter the restricted areas until evacuation orders are lifted. You can determine your zone and see evacuation status by entering your address on the evacuation map located on socoemergency.org. Thank you so much for your cooperation. I hope that we can once again gain entry into our properties in the next few days. But please be patient. It is for your safety and for the integrity of your site and solace to your family. So thank you so much. And again, my heart goes out to many, many families who lost their homes in this fire.
Thank you, Chair Gorin. We appreciate that. And we're also pleased to have with us Santa Rosa Mayor Tom Schwedhelm. Mayor Schwedhelm.
Thank you, Paul. I'll be brief. I have 3 items that I want to update folks on: our temporary evacuation point, garbage service update, and cooling center. So because some Santa Rosa households were allowed to head back to their homes yesterday due to changes in evacuation orders, the city and county are now consolidating the temporary evacuation points and shelter services into one location. The temporary evacuation point at a Place to Play on 3rd Street in Santa Rosa is now closed, and the Finley Community Center is no longer accepting new placements. If there are residents who are still in need of shelter assistance, they are directed to go to the parking lot at the Sonoma County Veterans Memorial Building. Information, resources, and possible referral to shelter options are available at this location. City and county staff are keeping a close eye on weather and fire conditions and will establish additional temporary evacuation points and shelter options as needed. Regarding garbage service, regular garbage, recycle, and compost services provided by Recology will resume as evacuation orders are lifted. We know that many residents who have been allowed back lost their power due to fire-related outages. Perishable food items likely need to be disposed, creating additional waste. To help with the additional waste disposal, Santa Rosa residents who have been allowed back into their homes may place extra bags of garbage next to their service bins on their regularly scheduled collection day for removal at no additional cost. And finally, with tomorrow's heat advisory in effect, the city of Santa Rosa will activate a cooling center from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the Franklin Park Clubhouse at 2095 Franklin Avenue in Santa Rosa. More information is available at srcity.org/cooling center. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Tom. We'll be sure to push out that information about the cooling center on our county social media posts as well. So thank you. Okay. Unfortunately, Congressman Huffman was having some technical difficulties, and we're trying to help him through that. And hopefully he'll rejoin us, and we'll go to him when he can. But for now, we will move on to take questions. Just want to remind everybody we'll be taking questions from our media partners, but we also want to invite questions from the public. Those in the audience are welcome to submit questions by emailing them to publicaffairs@sonoma.gov sonoma-county.org. That's public affairs, one word, at sonoma-county.org. And we have somebody standing by to go through those questions. Or you can just post your question in the comments area of the Facebook live stream. As always, for our media friends, please raise your hands. And but before we go to questions,
Paul?
that's just a heads up. We're going to go to Dr. Mace, who is with us today, as I promised, to give us an update on our COVID situation. Dr. Mace?
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. Appreciate it. Thanks for everybody who's here. I would like to give a update on COVID and on the medical aspects of the fire response. I'm Dr. Sundari Mace, Sonoma County's health officer. And here's our update on COVID-19 cases as of September 29th. We now have 7,528 confirmed cases in Sonoma County. And these include 1,253 active cases and 6,153 people who have recovered. We have now completed 173,371 coronavirus tests so far. We do remain in the purple tier of the state's California blueprint for a safer economy as of yesterday. And that is the framework which determines which businesses can reopen. This is the most restrictive level, and it's based on two main metrics: new daily cases per 100,000 population per day, that is, and test positivity rate. Our current daily case rate is 7.8, and that is down from last week's daily case rate, which is good news. But this is still above the benchmark of 7, which is what is required for us to move to the next tier, or the red tier. Our test positivity rate is 4%, which is actually low enough to move us into the orange tier. However, both criteria must be met for 2 weeks before we can progress to the less restrictive activities. As we face yet another wildfire, this time with tens of thousands of evacuees, it's important to remember the basics when evacuating during COVID-19. Though it becomes more difficult to do, we strongly urge you to remember the fundamentals of COVID-19 safety and all of the mitigation measures that we've been talking about. Wear a face covering whenever possible. Keep your distance from others, at least 6 feet away from non-household members if at all possible. And wash your hands often, clean surfaces, and follow all of the general hygiene measures that we've been discussing all along. If you are evacuated and need to stay with people who are not in your household, it's really critical for you to wear a face covering when you're in shared spaces. Have your household members stay in a separate bedroom, that is together. Use a separate bathroom, or disinfect all surfaces after each use. Maintain 6 feet of distance from those that are not in your household. Do not share food, cookware, utensils, plates, or bowls, and avoid touching your face with unwashed hands. These measures will help to minimize the potential of transmission of COVID-19 during this really difficult time. Moving to the shelters, right now the county does have 7 shelters. The COVID-19 assessment process at these shelters include asking evacuees screening questions and giving them temperature checks. Those who are not suspected of having COVID are directed to shelters by the county's care and shelter staff. Inside the shelters, medical staff assess people 3 times a day to check for symptoms and provide medical evaluation for anyone who requests it. Though we have not yet had any at our sites, medical staff would be called to evaluate suspected cases. If appropriate, staff would then contact an alternate care site, also known as an ACS, so any individual who might have the virus can safely isolate or those contacts could quarantine. So as of now, here are updated shelter numbers. And those shelters that have 0 cases have now closed. Petaluma Vets had 31 persons, Petaluma Fairgrounds 0, Petaluma Community Center 19, Santa Rosa Vets 33, Santa Rosa Raceway 6, Finley Center 19, and the SSU for congregate purposes 0, and for non-congregate purposes 30. Medical stats at the shelters as of today are at the Santa Rosa Vets, 40 urgent care needs were evaluated by medical staff. At the Petaluma Vets, 25 to 30 care needs were were evaluated by medical staff. At the fairgrounds, that is the Petaluma Fairgrounds, 15 urgent care needs were evaluated by medical staff. And overall, the shelters have been resourced by medical staff. That is, those that have medical staff have seen higher acuity or severity of illness and have seen more elderly patients during this event. Thank you very much. Stay safe. And we will continue to have ongoing updates about both the fire and COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mace. And I'm pleased to say that Congressman Jared Huffman was able to get on with us. Congressman, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Paul. And I'm sorry for my technical difficulties. Let me just associate myself with everything Congressman Mike Thompson said. Our two offices are fully engaged. Huge thanks to everybody for the great work you're doing under tough circumstances right now.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, let's go to some questions from the media and forum, the public. We're going to start with Mary Callahan of the Press Democrat. Mary?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
You're
Hi,
good.
Can you hear me?
You're good.
Good, excellent, Thank you. I just wanted to check in with our fire chiefs and find out sort of where your areas of concern are as we enter the evening hours in advance of tomorrow's red flag conditions, and understand. It sounds as if you guys are feeling pretty good about where lines have been built so far, but we're not calling it containment at this point, as we have only 2% containment. So if you could again for me differentiate that situation.
So Mary, as we get deeper into the week here and closer to the forecasted red flag warning, the southeast portion of the fire area becomes our greatest concern due to the wind pushing the fire out of the burn area into the surrounding green. So that line that I started off with from Bald Mountain down to Highway 12 was and remains the priority for the west zone, to make sure that we don't have fire that escapes the control line down there, which then creates the necessity for us to fall back to the Oakville grade, which is land that we don't want to give up. So crews are working as hard as they can to get that buttoned up today out there. And as I indicated, the aircraft that have been called in this afternoon, no fixed wing, but the helicopters are working, both Annadell and Skyhawk, picking at the targets of opportunity for the smokes maybe deeper in the burn, so we can start getting that depth for the mop up that needs to happen in from the control lines.
And when you talk about Oakville grade, you're talking about Trinity Road to Oakville?
Yeah, Oakville grade on the Napa side and Trinity Road on the Sonoma side. So the firing operation was conducted off of Adobe Canyon Road and Dozer Line, where the fire got across Adobe Canyon Road. There was a contingency line put in just on the south ridge from the park as you're in the Sugarloaf Park proper. But beyond that, we don't have a good point to take it back down to Highway 12. So there will be a contingency dozer line put in along the top of the ridge, separating the two counties, so that if the fire were to get out, we have a line to keep it out of either side of the fire as that fire develops, and then potentially a way to slow that fire's growth and or bring it back down to a point that conditions may allow at the time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Chief Nichols and Chief Gosner, since we have you, here's a question from one of our viewers on Facebook Live. Nancy asks, how is Annadell State Park doing? And she also asks, as a follow-up, do you forecast any additional evacuations with these changing conditions? Do you want to take the first one, Chief Nichols, and then maybe Chief Gosner can take the second?
Sure. So Annadell Park, the conditions that we've had the last 2 days had allowed us to use the existing trail network in the park to contain the portions of the fire that got into the park. So crews completed that firing operation 2 nights ago. So they've had yesterday and today to mop up those that line from the trail network interior on the burn area, and they're now being assisted by the helicopters to further that effort. And I did forget one thing earlier in that Chief Gosner's engines and our local partners have been assigned to the Oakmont Structure Protection Group today, and they are focusing purely on aggressive tactical patrol of the neighborhoods that have been impacted by fire, making sure that we don't have any holdover hot spots that could further damage or destroy structures. With that, I'll turn it over to Chief for the evacuations.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, so all the places that were released from a mandatory evacuation order to a warning, you are still in a warning. So if conditions warrant, if this new weather system poses enough threat to where we feel that we need to evacuate some of the zones again, we will do that. We will do it earlier rather than later. So our intent is to make sure everyone is aware of what's going on and letting people know when they need to get out if it becomes a mandatory situation. What I ask of all of you, the public that are watching, is that you also pay attention and you're aware of your surroundings and the weather. And if at any time you don't feel that you're safe, then I ask you to pack up and go ahead and go on your own. If you see a fire anywhere near your house that wasn't there before, that helps us. So call 911, let us know. But we have many resources in the area that are working on Annadell as we speak and around Annadell. And we have a lot of resources that can surge in anywhere around the fire scene right now, as Chief Nichols mentioned. So, but that doesn't mean another fire won't start or an ember doesn't carry where it shouldn't. So if you do see a fire start in that area, we need to know as soon as possible. Easiest way to do that is call 911 and let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. When I got back home last night, I spent a good hour and a half unpacking my car, and now I'm regretting it. I should have left everything in my van. So anyway, we will stay vigilant. Let's go to Nichelle Chavez from the Press Democrat. Nichelle?
Hi, thank you. I wanted to follow up with Chief Nichols about news that CAL FIRE put out earlier today about 2 firefighters who had to deploy their fire shelters. I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about where that deployment happened, who the firefighters were and what they were doing. Well, yeah, let's start with that.
So Nichelle, that investigation is ongoing. I can tell you that that was in the early stages of the fire on the Napa County side of the line. But at this point, that's what I can release. Both firefighters are uninjured and are back to work.
Do you have a specific area, more specific than Napa County?
They were working within the footprint of the original glass fire that was east of Silverado Trail.
And my last follow-up question is whether CAL FIRE has received any additional reports of firefighter injuries or separately shelter deployments for the glass fire.
Not aware of any other shelter deployments or significant firefighter injuries at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, let's go to Carrie Benefield. Carrie?
Hi, everybody. I think this is a question for Chief Nichols. Chief, can you mentioned it earlier, and I was hoping you could describe in some detail the work being done between Gates Road and Sharp Road there off Calistoga Road?
Sure. So bulldozers are the tool of choice at this point due to the lack of hand crews. So bulldozers were working both from Calistoga Road, Plum Ranch Road area back towards St. Helena, as were additional dozers working from St. Helena or in between Calistoga and St. Helena, Diamond Mountain Road area back towards Calistoga Gates Road. So we have bulldozers that are looking to meet in the middle, going direct where they can due to the current burning conditions we have. And then the engine companies that are assigned to those divisions are working to mop up the line from the bulldozer line into the burn to establish enough depth that we don't have to worry about the fire coming back out.
Okay. And then can you also tell me, there was a lot of tree clearing work and chainsaws and such on St. Helena Road. Is that cleanup, or is that firefighting, or is that a little bit of both? Like, how would you describe what's going on up on St. Helena Road?
So St. Helena Road, there's been major damage to the utilities out there, both power and cable and phone. So there was a utility work to get those lines restrung or start the process to get those utilities, those services back into place. And then any hazard trees that may fall on the road and injure civilians or firefighters driving on the road, either during the fire event or post-fire, are being cut down to take away that risk.
So that to you, that's not part of that's more cleanup. That's behind you. Is that a fair thing to say?
Correct. So the St. Helena Road is, for the most part, within the black. It's got burn on both sides of the road, so it is not a control line. So the road is getting opened back up to facilitate the repopulation, to get people home and to get that infrastructure put back into place.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay, our next question comes from one of our viewers. Dawn asks, when will damage assessments be available and where can people find them? Either Chief Nichols or Chris Godley, can you address that one?
So I can let you, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to let you know that at this point, because of fire, we really look and have started, CAL FIRE has started working with their damage investigation teams today. They'll physically move into the areas that are safe to do so and conduct very detailed analyses of each of the properties to be looking for specific structures, not just a cluster, if you would, but trying to identify which are primary residences, storage buildings, outbuildings, barns, those kinds of things. And they're going to look to determine if they're damaged, if they're affected, which means they're very modestly damaged, or if they've actually been lost. That inspection is going to take some time given the dynamic nature of this fire, the continuing evolving fire hazard conditions. It will be many days before that work is completed. But I should also mention, parallel to that work is the damage assessment that's being conducted by the private and public utilities in the area to assess their systems. The county's addressing their road infrastructure, including safety measures like guardrails and signage, as well as an environmental hazard, looking for hazardous materials that are present in the environment, usually at the locations where either work or home residences were located when the fire did impact them. As we did with the Walbridge fire last month, we'll begin to immediately post that information once we can nail down very specific information. And that information will be available at socoemergency.org, including maps, color-coded, showing levels of damage to each of these areas. And we'll have a very good accounting of this fire, depending on its behavior, of course, probably by this time next week.
Great. Jose, would you give a reminder for our Spanish-speaking viewers about the alternative broadcast that we are offering? Are you with us? Okay. No worries. I may have lost him. Anyway, let's go to Martin Espinoza of the Press Democrat. Martin.
Hi, my question is for Dr. Mace. Dr. Mace, one of your epidemiologists reports that there were 14 cases whose potential exposure to COVID-19 was during the evacuation from the Walbridge fire. What does this tell us about the potential for COVID transmission during the current fire and evacuations?
Yeah, that's a great question, Martin. And as we feared that the evacuations could potentially lead to exposures outside of the household and increased threat of the transmission of COVID-19. And keep in mind that those cases pointed out that they did evacuate and they may have had an exposure. It doesn't mean that we're certain that the exposure came from evacuation and being in contact with people who are outside of the household. But of note, they noted that. And so that's important for us to take into account. We've had even more evacuations in this last week. And I think we need to be really careful about ensuring that anybody who evacuated and who feels ill in any way should get tested, go see your doctor. People who worry that they may have been exposed because they evacuated should make an appointment with OptumServe and get tested, and to have a heightened awareness for the possibility of an increase in cases as a result of these evacuations, whether it be to a shelter or to the homes of friends, families, neighbors, that kind of thing.
So before I ask you to give us an update on the testing at the public health lab, we had talked a little bit about that yesterday. Speaking with regard to the evacuations, there were 2 skilled nursing facilities that had to be evacuated. One of them actually evacuated to some of its clientele to an evacuation center, which is not the most ideal place for somebody from a nursing home. They're currently trying to get all those people placed into a more appropriate setting. The interesting thing there is that those 2 skilled nursing homes are among the few in our county that don't have any cases among their residents, and it would be quite sad if that changed in the coming days or weeks. What's your office doing or your division doing to sort of ensure that those people are protected?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. That it is very worrisome that people who had no contact to COVID had to potentially go to situations where they could be exposed to COVID, especially that vulnerable population that we're trying to really keep safe here in our county. So what we had done, first of all, is in the shelter, anybody who comes to the shelter is screened for COVID. Everybody has a symptom check as well as a temperature check, as well as questions about whether they've been a contact to COVID or whether they themselves have been a case of COVID. If anybody answers yes to any of those questions, they get a rapid test before they are allowed to be in the shelter. So we're thinking that we have done a fairly good job screening out those people who could actually be COVID cases in the shelters. Additionally, we're working really closely with the skilled nursing facilities to try to take people who are in those congregate settings and place them safely in other similar congregate settings. And we've come up with a guidance for how the skilled nursing facilities can best try to do that. In other words, ensure that those that are negative for COVID go to skilled nursing facilities that are negative or have areas that are designated for those who are negative. And if those who are positive get evacuated, that they go again to skilled nursing facilities with designated areas for positive individuals. And then the same for those who've been exposed or under evaluation for COVID. And I think that's going to be the best way for us to try to protect this vulnerable population as we have to deal with these evacuations.
Great. And lastly, could you update us on where we are with testing capacity in our public health lab?
Yeah, I'm really happy to say that as of today, we are back to our normal testing as well as the laboratory capacity for running the tests. That was impacted during the past few days because of our own staff in public health having to evacuate. So we had a decrease in people who are able to do case management, to actually do testing, and in the laboratory for staff to run the test results and the test and give results, that is. We are back to 100% capacity now with everybody back to case management and testing and staffing the lab. Having said that, the air quality index also limited our ability to do the pop-up testing that we normally do. So we had to cancel a lot of the testing that was planned for Monday and Tuesday. Luckily, we are back now, I think, with our full capacity for these really important functions.
And if I could just slip another question in, do you think this might affect our standing next week when we get assessed on Tuesday?
So we're waiting to hear from the state whether, as a result of our decreased capacity to test and run the tests, the specimens that is, whether they may change the way that they do the assessment for Sonoma County. So we'll wait to hear about that and update people on a subsequent briefing as to where we stand.
Thank you.
So our next question comes from Mike DeWald, a producer at KSR Radio. He's asking, and this would be one of our fire chiefs. He's asking if you have an update on a portion of the fire near Highway 128 and Robert Louis Stevenson State Park. He said they're getting calls over there from folks saying it's pretty active visually right now, and they're wondering if you have any insight for those who are seeing smoke in that area. Chief Nichols, do you have an update on that?
Yeah, Paul. So the St. Helena Mountain portion of the fire, there over by Robert Louis Stevenson, Highway 29, has the slope and topography and the fuels with the mild onshore that we're experiencing. So that is the most active portion of the fire. And for the entire complex, that is the priority piece for today, because we don't want that to continue burning up Mount St. Helena and getting into Lake County and getting into more remote country. So that is the most active portion of the fire today, and that is the overall complex's top priority for containment issues, and they are getting all the support that they're looking for to try to ensure that doesn't continue to grow out there.
Great, thank you. We also have a number of questions from our viewers related to safely coming home, what to do about all the ash that's on their house, what advice you might give, and also, is there a special way to dispose of spoiled food, whether it's from ash or power outages? Dr. Mace, do you want to take that, or maybe one of our public safety folks?
I'm happy to add, but if one of the public safety folks wants to first take that, that's great.
Why don't you go ahead? Dr. Mace, why don't you go ahead and tackle that one?
That's about the safety with power outages for going back to homes. Is that what
it's mainly about the health safety of the ash, dealing with ash, and also throwing out spoiled foods?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. If your refrigerator obviously hasn't been working, anything that could be spoiled should be thrown out. It's not worth the risk. You should just toss whatever meats and milk products, even vegetables that look like they may have gone bad in the interim time should be thrown out. Don't take any risks. And I recommend that stuff in the freezer. If the freezer was closed and it's been, say, less than 12 hours, you can look and see if those things are still good or not. Beyond that, I would be very, very careful with consuming any of those products. As far as the ash, it's a real risk. And first of all, I think several of our safety officers have already mentioned that people really should not be going back in any way, shape, or form to areas that are at this time prohibited. It's a real safety risk. And as far as ash in itself isn't going to risk if you were to, it's not hot for, if it falls in your property and things, but the AQI is still really quite high and in dangerous levels. I think the last that we saw, the AQI had been somewhere around anything over 150 is considered really unsafe. And we've had a few days over 150 at this time. So we need to be really careful about that. I know we also have Dr. Baldwin on the line here and the call. If she wants to add anything about fire safety, that's great. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to others.
Dr. Baldwin, we can't do, I don't know if you're on mute. No? Is your sound down? Okay. Yeah, let's try now. No, we're having mic
We're on a
problems.
phone, it's *6.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
okay.
If I,
Well, anyways,
could,
yeah, go ahead.
We haven't.
this is Chris Scotland. I could just add that for those that are returning home in non-burned areas, we're still going to have quite a bit of ash in and around our house. It's important to treat that with respect. Ash can continue to present health issues. It's important to note that ash will continue to break down, if you would, and constitute a health hazard if not treated appropriately. You really want to avoid direct contact with that ash. You really want to wash it off as soon as possible if you come into contact with it. People with heart or lung disease should be especially careful around working or cleaning up with the ash, as well as children and pets. Pets are especially good at bringing that into the house. We recommend while you're cleaning up to wear clothing that's protective, like long sleeve shirts, full pants, that kind of thing. And then changing your shoes, especially as you transition from a dirty area into a clean area inside your house. Wearing protection, including an N95 or N100 mask, is going to help keep those particulates out of your lungs. And then really kind of avoid stirring it up as much as possible. We know you're going to have to clean it. It's often helpful when you're sweeping to mist it with water a little bit, so you're not just creating dust clouds in your backyard. When you're inside your house, we're going to suggest using a vacuum with a HEPA filter, not a traditional household vacuum, which would continue to push the particles into the house. But if you have a HEPA filter vacuum, that's very effective. And then disposing the ash can be done in the regular trash, but we suggest that you bag it so that it doesn't constitute another hazard when the trash can gets dumped. That's about it.
Yeah, I just want
Great.
to add, actually, quickly, let me add a few things. And that is, if you have asthma, COPD, heart disease, and you are feeling short of breath, obviously, if you have any kind of symptoms, you should seek medical assistance. The use of an N95 respirator will protect you from the inhalation of ash or from any other particles from the AQI being unsafe. However, the one-way valves, the N95s that have one-way valves, shouldn't be used at this time because of COVID. And that's a big difference from the previous fires that we've had.
Thank you. Excellent answer. Let's go to Will Schmidt at the Press Democrat.
Oh, Paul, I wanted to
yeah.
add one air
Yeah,
district.
sure. Supervisor Zane.
Sure. So just as again, to adding more precaution to being outside during the high toxins in the air, that particulate matter, the wood smoke, is particularly dangerous to people who have any type of heart disease or respiratory disease. It actually gets into your bloodstream and can cause a stroke or heart attack. So be really careful if you have a history with that, to just stay indoors for now.
Great. Good point. I just want to note that we do have information about food safety after a power outage is available on socoemergency.org. And Supervisor Zane, you had a message about volunteer and service and mental health that you wanted to mention today too.
Yeah, sure. I think there's some people who have been asking me about seniors and caregiving, and there have been caregivers who've been separated from their seniors, and it's been tough, especially on our older adult population. So I did want to give an information and assistance line that the county runs to provide that assistance. If you're a caregiver, you have a loved one that's an older adult, and you're really concerned about some things and getting the services they need, to call our info and assistance line. It's 5 days a week, regular hours, 9 to 5, and it's 565-4636, 565-4636. And if you are a senior and need some additional caregiving, maybe you've been separated from your caregiver, they can also help you with that. For more serious mental health issues, you can also call the Crisis Stabilization Unit, and that is a 24-hour treatment, or you can stay up to 24 hours there, and you can walk in, and that phone number is 576-8181, 576-8181. So take very good care of yourself, Sonoma County, because we are in multiple disasters right now, and it's very trying on all of us. Wave and smile whenever you can too.
Thank you, Supervisor. So it's the top of the hour, but we'll take one more question, and that's from Will Schmidt from the Press Democrat. Will?
Hi, Paul. Can you hear me?
We are on.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys squeezing me in. These questions are probably best for Chief Nichols and Chief Gosner. My understanding from talking to Chief Brunton earlier in the day is that a fire of this size, the glass fire with about 50,000 acres, would typically have about 3,000 to 4,000 personnel attached to it. I think I heard today we're just over 2,000, maybe 2,100. I know there's a lot of competition for resources because a lot of the state is on fire right now, but do you have any sense whether we'll be able to draw in additional personnel to shore up the folks that are already here and get us closer to where we need to be as far as staffing?
So Will, I'll start. I can tell you that the last I checked, we were in the neighborhood of 27 major fires across the state. So the conditions are such here in the 2020 fire season that there are just not additional resources to be had out there. I know that we are bringing in resources from as far south as San Diego and across the rest of the state. We have 9 National Guard helicopters that have been dedicated to the incident due to the drawdown of the typical firefighting aircraft that we summon to these large major fires. So know that all the firefighters that are available are on the lines, and that at the end of the day, we still have day-to-day calls for service and fires on that are not major fire events to deal with. So we do have county resources that Chief Gosner can speak to that have been released from the fire to get them back to their respective departments, because they surged in the early hours and days of the glass fire here to ensure the defense of Sonoma County as the fire burned into it, and initially Napa County when they went over initially to the glass fire when it first started. So as other fires in the state come under control and those resources are no longer needed at those fires, that'll free up firefighters for the glass fire and other fires that are still underway. But that's all going to be dependent on weather conditions and, unfortunately, new starts, because obviously we can't add to the major incidents that we have out there. So we need to make sure that we contain those initial attack fires so that we can have the available resources for these major fires. With that, I'll let Chief Gosner speak to the local component of what's going on out there.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Will. So let me just start by saying I don't think any fire in the last month and a half has had the adequate resources that it normally does. And we shouldn't expect that to change for the rest of the summer. So at a certain point, it's up to us who are on the fire, right? And that's where we live. So that's what we do. As far as the Sonoma County upstaffing, every fire department in Sonoma County participates whenever there's a red flag or a serious fire where there needs to be surge resources. We do that happily, but not every department can maintain much more than a few days. So we have to release some incidents. A lot of these departments are combination departments, smaller volunteer departments. And then you have the larger departments like Santa Rosa and Petaluma and Sonoma County Fire District. And we all work in conjunction with CAL FIRE. But this is an extraordinary fire season. There's only so much you can give with this weather pattern that is coming tomorrow. We are attempting to see who we can get to upstaff so we have that task force or two in our back pocket for initial attack to keep the fire small. And like I said earlier, those would be able to surge into the glass incident if it became necessary. But every time we throw more at the glass incident, that's less we have to protect the communities at home that are uncovered. So it's a fine balance. We work with it every day. And during times like this, we've experienced it during the wall bridge as well. There's very little extra resource. Well, there is no extra resource, right? So when you send more, that means you got fire engines in Hayward, from Hayward and other places covering stations in Santa Rosa, or you don't have a fire engine in a station in Santa Rosa or other districts or other cities. So that's just the world we live in right now, and that's where we're at. It's a balance, and we're doing the best to balance that.
Thank you both. Your points are well taken. Chief Nichols, are you aware, is there any other of the major fires, and we know we have so many, do any others have as many or more resources on them than the glass fire?
Will, I can get you that information. I don't have it directly in front of me. I know we are one of the more robustly staffed fires across the state right now, but there are major fires that have their hands full. We are now focused on the glass fire here locally, but you have to recall that the August complex, the largest fire in state's history, is still burning and was actively damaging and destroying structures and exponentially growing a couple days ago when we were impacted by the wind of the glass fire. So while we have a large fire in our backyard and we have thousands of homes at risk, there are many other fires here in the state that are experiencing the same problems, and every fire is looking for those resources to bring to bear. I can further Chief Gosner's statement about no additional resources to bring to bear, that day to day, the Sonoma Lake Napa unit here would have a minimum of 21 engines in fire stations with 5 battalion chiefs across the unit. And during the fire, we were down to 3 engines and 2 battalion chiefs for the 2 million acres in the 6 counties that make up the Sonoma Lake Napa unit. So when we say we're out of resources, we are truly out of resources.
I got you. I understand. My last question of the night, if I may. When you're dealing with a fire of this size and you don't have the firefighters, that you don't have as many firefighters as you should have in a perfect world to fight it, how does that change your approach? Like, what does that look like? Does it take longer to dig those containment lines or to do mop-up work? Can you explain that a little?
Yeah, so initially, as the fire is growing, if you don't have the resources to effectively and safely combat that fire, then that means we have to draw a bigger box and give up ground that we wouldn't have otherwise given up had we had the firefighting resources on hand to fight that fire the way that we fight wildland fires. And then once that fire is contained, and we've experienced that this summer where we have a wind-driven or weather-driven fire that we basically react to during the course of the fire. When the weather changes and it gives us our opportunity, that's when we are able to jump on it and get that fire contained. So you're absolutely right in that if we don't have the resources to staff the fire, that means that there's not as much production occurring, and therefore it takes us longer to mop up that fire and secure that fire before we can release those resources.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, that's the sobering reality of our times, which just underscores the heroic efforts of those who are out there battling these fires and how much we appreciate all the work they're doing. With that, we are going to draw a close to this news briefing. We want to thank all of you for being here today. In particular, I want to thank all those behind the scenes who helped to put this Zoom briefing together, including our public information partners at the City of Santa Rosa and at CAL FIRE. For the next update on the glass fire, we encourage you to tune in to the CAL FIRE media briefing tomorrow at 11 a.m. at the Santa Rosa Fairgrounds. They will be carrying that live on their website and their social media. We will be streaming that as well on the County of Sonoma Facebook page. We also invite you to rejoin us tomorrow at 5 p.m. for another joint media briefing with the city of Santa Rosa and CAL FIRE. On one final note, I want to encourage everyone to fill out your census forms. Today may be your last opportunity to do so. And it is during times like this, times of disasters, when we see the critical need to be able to receive federal aid that is based on those census population counts. So please, if you haven't already, fill out the census today by visiting my2020census.gov or calling 844-330-2020. That's 844-330-2020. So with that, we encourage you all to stay safe, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you.